The title of this lecture is Sources of Crime Data, Part 2. We're going to look at the National Crime Victimization Survey. By far and away, this is the much better source of crime data than the Uniform Crime Reports, or UCR, covered in Part 1 of this lecture, with the exception of murder, because this does not cover murder, the National Crime Victimization Survey. You cannot ask somebody if they've been a victim of murder. Okay, so, like I said, it's not perfect, but it is far and away our best estimator of crime rates. It is based upon a nationally representative sample, which is the best kind of sample of the U.S. household population age 12 and older. Okay, so basically it asks people if they have been victims of crime, and they are to report that. So that should be, if you think about our criticisms of the Uniform Crime Reports, that's better, right? So Uniform Crime Reports can only count crimes known to the police. So if it's never reported to the police, they can't report it. This, on the other hand, would get both reported and unreported crime, if you think about it. It does. So basically, let me read you a little quote here. The National Crime Victimization data come from questionnaires carefully designed for validity and reliability by social scientists. They are administered to a very large, demographically representative sample of the U.S. population. While no survey is perfect, National Crime Victimization Survey represents the best available source of data on crime victimization in the U.S. How the data are reported is subject to political manipulation, but the data themselves are scientifically valid. Okay, so we will criticize them at the end of this survey, but basically it's much better than the Uniform Crime Reports, or UCR. The National Crime Victimization Survey, you'll notice, does not, you can see there on the slide what it measures, and it does not measure murder. As I said in the intro, you cannot ask somebody, hey, have you been a victim of murder in the past year? So therefore, that's why the UCR is our only source of data on murder. But you can see what it does cover by reading those. Okay, there are some valid criticisms of National Crime Victimization Survey. The best criticism is that it's impossible to get a representative sample of everybody in the United States. Okay, so the next best thing is a sampling frame of the U.S. household population 12 and older. Now, it's legitimate to say that this underrepresents people living in what I call transient living situations. So it would underestimate crime in the hood, as we used to call it, not to mention prisons, military, etc. That's legitimate, but I challenge you to name a better sampling frame to measure crime in the U.S. than the U.S. household population age 12 and older. It includes apartments, people, not just houses. Okay. Now, so you can't really, I can't think of one, and if you can, send me an email, and if it's really, really better, I'll add it to this lecture and give you some extra credit. But it is fair to say that the sampling frame, U.S. household population age 12 and older, clearly misses some crime for folks without a steady roof over their head, right? And, clearly these people are likely to have higher levels of criminal victimization than the household population. So the homeless would be a shining example. This survey is going to miss homeless people, and just sort of a fact of living on the street as a homeless person. They steal from each other. They beat each other up. They get drunk. They get in fights. So long story short, homeless people are probably clearly suffer higher rates of crime than the U.S. household population. Now I'm talking about criminal victimization, not executing crime, if you will. Okay, I'm sure they do more than that also than the U.S. household population as a group, not as individuals. The next criticism is weak, but it's also true, okay, but I don't want you, like, if you're going to criticize the National Criminal Victimization Survey, I wouldn't use this as a really good critique. Okay, so since it's a survey, there's a chance that some crimes are underreported, overreported, meaning they're made up or exaggerated, or their details were forgotten over time. Usually it's over the span of a year, so that's possible. But these sorts of errors are present in any sort of survey, and they are minimized by good social science methodology. Okay. Now you can you can criminal. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. You can criticize this for basically having good data misused to make crime seem worse than it is. You'll see in a second in the next slide, the least serious crime in a category make up the vast majority of the cases. Okay, so let's go on here. Okay, so look at all assaults, right? And then we break it down to simple assaults. And you can see that of all assaults, the vast majority of them were simple assaults that had no injury, 59%, right? So I'm looking at the far right column. Okay, aggravated assaults, that is that creates serious bodily harm. My friend who works in crime statistics said, think of it as, you're not just getting a Band-Aid. You need medical attention. That'd be, it's not a legal definition, but it's giving you a way to sort of conceptualize it. Okay, so with injury are small, right? Most of them are threatened with a weapon. So even aggravated assaults, the vast majority of those didn't result in an injury, but they were just you threatened somebody with the weapon and said, I'm going to get you, sucker. Okay, so basically, even if you don't actually assault a person, if you threaten them with a weapon, that's what's called aggravated assault. So when you look at the right-hand column, you can see that of all the assaults with the serious injury, right, it's only 7.3% of all of them. Now, minor injury, again, these are like, I'm not saying, I'm trying to minimize it, but I'm just saying these are sort of cuts that you could be treated as a Band-Aid or whatnot. You don't need medical attention. They are far less serious than an aggravated assault with an injury, which would be like, yeah, you need medical attention. So that's a shining example of, if you just look at the proportion of people who have an assault, it's 2.74% of everybody in the household population, right? But of those who actually had an injury, right, that would have required medical attention, that's less than 1%. That's 0.2%. That's why we use the 2 per 1,000, right? That's a way to conceptualize a percentage less than 1%. Okay. So these are old, but I'm just sort of, this sort of thing happens year by year by year. The story remains the same, right? The most serious assault accounts for the vast majority of all cases. Okay, so that's a valid criticism. For a more radical criticism, let me read you a quote from an author. This is basically what we just talked about. Okay, but so he will say it far more eloquently than I. In almost every category of crime reported, the least serious crime accounts for the majority of incidents reported. In the NCVS category, violent crimes comprises rape, robbery, assault, murder is not included. Assault is the least serious of these assaults, and they count for vast majority, 84% of all violent crimes. Assault can be subdivided into aggravated and simple, as we have done in this slide, right? That's an aside. And then he goes on to basically say what I just suggested to you, right? So of those that had some sort of injury, we would add minor injury 16 and aggravated injury 7. So that is 7 and 16 is roughly 23. So less than a quarter of all assaults had some sort of injury. And of that quarter, 16% of them was a pretty minor injury. That's his point. Okay. The next slide, I'm going to show you sort of what I would and would not test you on a test. Okay, So if you look up the National Crime Victimization Survey, you can find the latest data. Okay, I'm not going to test you on crime data numbers, so I'm not going to say what was the murder rate. This counts for both UCR and National Crime Victimization Survey. I'm not going to ask you for like what is the exact murder rate or what is the exact assault rate. What I will do is sort of say, well, which one is the biggest, right? So sort of what we just did on the last side. Okay. So it's impractical for me to update these every single year. That's why I sort of refer you to the report. But in general, both violent and property crime has been steadily going down since 1973. And the next two slides don't have audio, but you can look at them either here or better at the lecture slide handouts just to give you an idea of what I just said. Okay, so the first one starts in 73, right? That's violent crime rates. That's what most per, okay? So you can see it goes down and then it goes from 93 on. You can see it continues to go down. Okay, you see that little blip there? That's kind of interesting. But things go up and down all the time. Doesn't mean it's meaningful. The overall trend over time is important. So you can see violent crime is going down until 2015 at least. So it's basically at the lowest levels it's ever been. Okay, same with property crime. You can sort of see the same thing. And then these are just some data where I sort of give you, if you look at the far right hand column, it tells you how much they've gone down in the looking at those two previous slides. So you don't need to memorize this. I just want you to get a feel that both property and violent crime have been down over time since 1973. I would want you to know that. Okay, that's the end of the lecture.